I guess we are ready. I mean, let's start. So welcome, Erik, and thanks a lot for joining me today. So first of all, I mean, I will make a very quick, short intro. So my name is Serhat, and I'm one of the founders of Resmo. So we can, I can talk about Resmo, after Erik. So Erik, first, I would like to get to know you.
We should talk about Resbo. We could talk about CloudZero. We should talk about everything. Today's gonna be fun. So I'm the CTO and founder of CloudZero. I started the company in 2016, and my job from day one has been to fire myself from a lot of the other jobs until as we build a bigger company. And we're focused on cloud cost intelligence, helping people understand the cost of their actions, everything that they're doing in the cloud, how all this stuff kind of comes together. We'll talk a little bit about today, what part of the topic is, engineering led. That's really important, near and dear to our heart, because the thought process here really is that every engineering decision is a buying decision, and the engineers, well, they're the ones making the buying decisions, right? So they also have a pretty amazing position in terms of what they can do to save money or build more efficient systems. They're in the driver's seat. So yeah, we'll get into the details on that. But Sarah, like, there's a good kind of connection between, I think, what our two companies do, right? I think that you think about what you're spending your money on, and then also, of course, well, what are those things? Sometimes people have a hard time even finding those things. You guys are solving a pretty good problem. You should tell us a little bit about Resbo as well.
Sure. I mean, so the idea for Resmo came about when we were working at Atlassian. So eventually, I mean, it's, going a bit back, I mean, so I was working at Opsgenie, which was acquired by Atlassian. And then we had this, a lot of security questionnaires, coming from the Atlassian security and compliance team. And we basically, I mean, talking with engineers all day long, because we had about 100 AWS accounts, which made it very easy to actually find what we are looking for. So when they ask a question, it was really hard, I mean, to answer, and we take manual screenshots. Everything is changing so fast, like we try to keep up. The idea for Resmo came from that experience. So we wanted to centralize, every asset in cloud and SaaS, what's happening in your environment. And definitely that is about giving visibility first, like discovering what you have, known and unknowns. I mean, even the known ones is sometimes hard to keep up because cloud is changing, so fast. So that's, the problem we are solving, really. I mean, know what you have, make sure that they're secure. And, we can easily tie that to the security data. And what you said actually resonates me with a lot, because back in the days, engineers were really in the driving seat at Opsgenie in my previous gig. Like, again, per developer AWS accounts, every one of them costing some money. And developers were really empowered to do whatever they want. We trusted them. Then that means we still need a way to monitor what's happening, just in case there's no mistake. So it was really a hard, a balance between giving them some freedom versus making sure that everything is under control, not going out of hand. So that resonates me very well.
Yeah, you've lived in this pain. I think that's true of any. I mean, we're both founders, right? We both lived in this thing. Our stories are, come from shared pain, right? There was a challenge that we had. We lived through something, and then we were like, "There's got to be a better way. Surely somebody solved this problem." You look around and you go, "No, not exactly." And I tell people, like, one of the craziest ways to solve your problems is to go start a company. It is definitely not for the faint of heart, but if you are, if you're willing to go for it, go for it. Because is nothing better than getting a chance to kind of build something, see it grow, and we're both growing. It's pretty exciting to see what we've been up to.
Yep. And I mean, let's start the conversation with why are companies still struggling with this? Like, let's say very fundamental question because, but important question to answer, because obviously cloud providers, they offer some sort of like cost visibility, but I can see, I mean, how your company is growing crazy, and you know, people are struggling with cost management on Reddit, Twitter. There's always, like, every day I see a tweet, I see a post on social media about like someone's cloud cost just went nuts for some reason, and they don't even know, they don't know beforehand. So I mean, why are companies are still struggling with this?
Hmm. I mean, it used to be a joke, right? And I think for a lot of people, it might have been a little bit funny because we used to be in an era of growth at any cost, right?
Yeah.
Particularly in the startups, seed, stage kind of companies. The message was grow, 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 grow. Don't worry about it. Spend the money, and then you get a crazy bill, and you'd laugh about it. And that's not so. It's maybe that's not should
It's
have
past
never been
life now.
true. You know, it's definitely not true now, and I think it's not really a laughing matter anymore either because at the end of the day, that's taking money away from value that you could be real value that you could be building for your customers. That might be a headcount or two, or somebody's job that is impacted by not thinking about how efficiently you are building your systems. And so, a lot of companies have been on this journey for a while.
Mhm.
There are still plenty of companies that are entering into the cloud as new, but a lot of companies have been on this journey for a while, and they're kind of waking up to the idea that um, in the past they tried to do things like purchase RIs and savings plans and try to squeeze that rock, but no more water's coming out of that, right? And engineering and finance, they've been playing this game of like this very expensive game of hot potato between who owns things,
Mhm.
right? It's like
Yep.
I don't own it. Finance pays the bills; they own it. Finance goes, we don't know what the heck's going on. Engineering tells us they're doing something with Kubernetes. We don't even know what that is, right? And so they've been like throwing this potato back and forth and not really focusing on it. But I think the reality is that uh, now more than ever, this realization that it's no longer just about buying better. It needs to be about building better. And who are the people building? Right? It's the engineers. Right?
Yep.
They are in the most powerful position to actually enact change.
Mhm.
Uh, and then we've also seen this new term start to emerge, if people haven't heard about it, called FinOps,
Mhm.
right? Which is really, it's not a finance thing, it's not an engineering thing. These are teams that have to work together. And FinOps is one of the fastest growing communities I've seen out there. They went
Yep.
from hundreds to thousands to 10. I think there's more than 10,000 people on LinkedIn now that associate with FinOps in some way in their title.
Mhm.
So it's pretty amazing.
Yep.
But anyways, yeah, it's a lot. Customers are on this journey. They're in it now, that's for sure.
Yep. I mean, it's like, I mean, it was DevOps, then it was DevSecOps, then it was DevSec FinOps. I mean, really, I mean, the FinOps part, uh, the actually that made a difference because that's a real problem that people actually need to solve,
Mm.
especially when the companies get bigger. Like, who owns this thing? I mean, that's a big problem, and that's if it's associated with the cost, then it's gonna also make a lot of changes if you again save some money, as you said.
Yeah.
So I mean, um, you guys are working with a lot of startups as well as some big enterprises.
Mm.
What I wonder, so as a early stage startups, uh, as an early stage startup, we have some concerns, but I would probably guess that enterprises they have some different concerns around cost management. I mean, is there any difference between a small company like 10 people, 50 people to 1,000 people company that has, like, I don't know, millions of dollars of AWS bill? What are their concerns? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly changes as you go through the kind of different stages of growth as a company. I think it's changing a lot in terms of the direction that is coming from the venture community as well. I was out at
Mhm.
Sassiter last year, and I saw the conversation shift from growth at any cost to efficient growth at any cost. And but still, you're a startup, you're scaling, you might not have or you're not really scaling yet, you're still trying to figure out product market fit. You're
Hmm.
trying to understand if you even are on the right path, with the functionality. So you're not
Hmm.
necessarily thinking long and hard about your bill. Maybe you've got a ton of credits from your cloud
Hmm.
provider for free.
Hmm.
So when you go in and log into Cost Explorer, you just see a big zero there, so you don't think about it.
Yep.
the there is one kind of key challenge that CloudZero has helped companies at that stage though with, which is something that most startup companies struggle with, which is pricing and packaging, right?
Hmm.
They're in this business. I call these, companies, the companies that we serve, cloud driven businesses. We're all in this business to deliver some sort of value as a SaaS company or internet kind of driven business, and that's those are the kinds of companies that CloudZero serves well. And if you're in that business as a cloud driven organization, well, what is the cost to deliver the value of your product? How does that tie back to the revenue or your pricing and packaging, right? So if a lot of
Yep.
startups will make a mistake. They'll make some assumptions about how much things are going to cost. They'll put together a pricing model based on what they think the market can bear. They
Hmm.
kind of field this into market, and then after a couple of years, they kind of turn back to where they are, and they realize, wait a second, we accidentally built something that is not profitable at all.
Hmm.
Right? And they may have a fantastic product, but they've already put out this pricing that puts them at a disadvantage, and they learn they're not going to solve this problem in volume, right? As they
Hmm.
add more and more customers, they're losing more and more money
Yep.
because they didn't early on in the process think about how they were going to, align their pricing and kind of packaging with what it costs to deliver that.
Yep.
So that's a kind of key thing that startups need to think about differently, and it's one of the kind of areas where CloudZero thinks about this problem differently because we look at bringing not just cost data into our platform, we bring in telemetry associated with what your customers are doing, like what features are they using, how often are they logging in, what types of activities are they taking. We can incorporate that as a stream of information to start to calculate a cost per tenant or a cost per customer,
Hmm.
and or a cost per feature, which is super critical to like answering that
Yep.
question.
Yep. I mean, by the way, I mean, just to add a few points, we've been at that same spot, and I can definitely say that's super, super crucial. I mean, usually that's,
Mm.
when you start, your startup, it feels like, I mean, there are other examples in the market, so you can just,
Yeah.
usually, maybe there is not in some cases, but there are some examples. So you just say, I mean, pricing isn't going to be a big issue, but that usually is one of the biggest issue. I've lived that. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the case with us. We are still learning. We still haven't found our best like pricing model. So I can say that. I mean, and I also definitely see the value of like really understanding which features are causing what kind of cost, so we can just maybe change the packaging somehow or put that feature in the upper
Mhm.
plan. So really, I mean, without that kind of data, that kind of insight, it's just a guess, and then you probably made another mistake, and you have to change pricing again, and you
Yeah.
cannot just keep changing the pricing, and that's just going to annoy some customers.
No, your
It's you
customers will be a little
eventually.
frustrated
Yeah.
with you. And
Exactly.
sometimes you go, well, we came up with pricing based on what we thought the market would, told
Hmm.
us would work or not. But, sometimes the answer is, well, there's just no profitable way to deliver that functionality, or maybe, the engineering work still is to be done to kind of architect something a little bit more efficient.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're just going to get yourself into trouble later when you discover,
Yep.
you've effectively been funding your, low prices with VC money,
Yep.
and that is a recipe for disaster for any kind of startup. Now,
Hmm.
you know, you asked, where do people go in terms of enterprise customers and getting
Hmm.
to larger, when you get to this place where you're spending maybe $1 million or more.
Hmm.
Yeah, this problem becomes a lot more acute.
Hmm.
Um, and then it becomes one of kind of what I was talking about earlier. Like, all right, we've bought RIs and savings plans, and we're not we're still our costs, we can't attribute them to the right people. We can't allocate this to the spend of features or teams, or we can't have a meaningful conversation as a business about what we're spending. It's almost like a lot of companies today are like a Toyota or a Ford, but they can't answer the question, what does it cost to run their assembly line, or the supply chain, or how do they, what it costs to deliver an automobile, which is crazy, right? But a lot of
Yeah.
software companies are operating that way. So, our focus shifts to one more around business efficiency, driving overall, operations, helping organizations find, of course, cost savings. But a lot of that takes the form of visibility to the engineers who are rapidly iterating. Your engineering team as a startup is small. You get to one of these larger companies, you may have hundreds of developers on your team. Now it becomes really hard. How do I get information out to the right people at the right time so that when they're making these buying decisions, they're going to make good ones?
Yep.
And CloudZero operates in a different mode there, where it's very targeted visibility. And I think engineers are hungry for this information because, I mean, I don't know, an engineer doesn't love working with constraints.
Yep.
It helps kind of refine and focus them on a problem they're solving.
Mhm.
But thanks to the cloud, I have like infinite scale, but I
Yep.
do not have infinite wallet, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And
And
I'm working on infinite wallet though.
yeah.
If anybody's on the call who's figured out infinite wallet, they should just send me a slide into my DMs on that one. I would love to.
Yep, and I mean, even like getting that kind of information, like how much my team is or my project is spending on cloud, is really hard. At that scale, they usually have no idea until someone tells them that they're spending too much money. So they
Yeah.
cannot know. I mean, they already made the decisions, architectural decisions. So it's really, I mean, re-architect, some things that would take like another month or two. So if they knew that these things would cost or I mean are costing that much, they could make some early improvements.
Mhm.
So that would help them a lot. I've been in that situation. So you mentioned, I mean, you guys are collecting some metric kind of data, and feeding that data, maybe correlating that data with the cloud costs. So, I mean, I'd like to hear more about that. I'm pretty sure attendees are also, curious because you mentioned it, but I would like to learn more about the use case, like what kind of data, how do we send that kind of data to CloudZero? Can you
Mhm.
explain that a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it is super powerful. So, you know, most people are used to looking at their cloud bill and going, "Oh, okay, I'm spending. I'm going to make up a number. All right, I'm spending $10,000 on RDS. Okay, but what? What is actually happening there, right? Maybe I'm spending $1 million on RDS. What is happening there? And
Mm-hmm.
the the reality is you can't answer that question without more data. And the data that you need is, well, what is transactionally, like what is happening on that system? And from that perspective, you can look at it from a lot of different angles. You can try to think about, well, all right, I want to view that cost as a shared cost, and I'd like to allocate it to different business units that are using that asset, and maybe I just want to allocate it evenly. This kind of shared cost, sometimes called showback or chargeback kind of thought, which is where a lot of people start. But that doesn't necessarily tell the true story. Because the true story is really driven by consumption. Who is consuming this thing? So what CloudZero has built is the ability to not just ingest, all the great cost and usage data coming from whatever cloud providers you're using, but also what we call very broadly telemetry. And we keep it broad because telemetry takes a lot of different forms. But let's take that database example. Um, we've got a query log, right? We've got data that's coming out of that system that's telling us what queries are coming into the system, where those queries are coming from. If you want to get a little bit more detailed, you can even tag those queries and start to think about how you would add a customer ID, for example, as a comment to those queries. So that becomes part of the query log. That information we can parse out automatically and turn that into this telemetry that we then map to the cost of that RDS system. So we connect the dots between some business analytics or system analytics and your cost. And when we tie those two things together, we then produce a whole new dimension of data that is now breaking apart by whatever that data was telling me. So let's say query. right?
Hmm.
Now I'm breaking apart that spend not just by consumer, but I'm breaking it apart by query. And this makes it an engineering relevant data point now because I can then present to the engineering team that owns that product or feature or that service that they're responsible for the most expensive query on the database, right? Or that this particular customer, for some reason, that query runs super inefficient. Oh, somebody forgot an index, or somebody didn't think about that use case or that data pattern or access pattern.
Yep.
But it turns it into something actionable. And so our customers are taking those two sources of data, cost data and the telemetry associated with their database in this example. They're bringing it together, and then they start to get anomaly alerts. They start to get notifications about how their system is being used and trending over time, and that information comes with direction direct to the engineer to go, well, here's your most expensive query.
Hmm.
And most engineers equipped with that information, they don't need much more. You've given them the knowledge to go, oh, it's my fault. I, did that. I didn't, I was just thinking about my query. I didn't think about how I could make this more efficient. And I've seen companies, save tens of thousands of dollars with like 5 minutes of an engineer's time because they change the query or they reduce
Yep.
the number of API calls they're making or they just make that little bit more efficiently. Again, because they made a buying decision and they didn't have any feedback into that
Yep.
process. And setting this stuff up is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and
Um,
I mean, I haven't been in this shoe, but one of my friends told me, at a big company they used to work at, they had this Athena, query, which would cost just to run one query like $4. I mean,
yeah,
they didn't made any optimization on it, so BizOps people they had no idea. They would just run the query. I mean, even just running that kind of query a few times a day, and probably they were running it a lot more, would cost a
yeah.
fortune. I mean,
Yeah, if it's valuable and nobody really told them that it costs any money, why not? Like, oh, well, yeah, let's just go refresh the data. And yeah, you've got this Athena query that costs $4, and all you need is like somebody to go, oh, this is helpful. I'd like this information updated every 15 minutes, right?
yeah.
You're in
And then
for a
you,
yeah, you know,
then you are gonna open a ticket like once you found out about that bill and try to get your money back.
yeah, yeah. And the average like industry average is like 30 days that people learn about this stuff. CloudZero will be telling you about that in hours, right? And
Yep.
people would, of course, somebody hopefully would be freaking out over that because that's you're gonna have a bad time that
Yep.
that
Yep.
month.
An email is not enough in that case. I mean,
No, no, it's yeah. You want phone calls,
yeah,
emails, emergency flares.
exactly, exactly. Exactly. I mean, so that was super helpful. I mean, just knowing that, what kind of problems enterprises face versus startups face.
Mm,
I definitely agree with like startups, they don't really need to optimize things a lot because they either have credits or they have, they don't have a lot of AWS or, Azure or whatever like cloud provider they are using. They don't have a lot of they don't spend a lot of money already, so maybe a few bucks, I don't know, like $1,000 or something like that, so they don't do early optimizations. But I also know that, from experience, that if you just let things go, it's really hard to come back and when you try to optimize things. So just starting strong is really helpful over the long run because it's a long run. I mean, it's not, you're not going to
yeah.
probably start your startup in a
Well, you're
year or two.
setting the groundwork for what could mean the difference between you as a startup founder building a profitable company for the long
Yep.
haul, or
Yep.
one where you just have to keep on asking for more money from your
Mhm.
VCs, and eventually that's not going to go
Yep.
well for you. Um, because you haven't built actually you don't have a real business model.
Yep.
You're kind of living a dream, and there are a lot of companies out there right now operating in that mode, and they're struggling.
Yep.
So the sooner you get your arms around that, because I think for startups it's not about cost savings. It's really about laying the foundation for profitability later,
Yep.
and laying the foundation for an efficient business that is
Mhm.
that you're building for the long haul. Over time, it changes. Like I need to rein things in, but at the end of the day, what people want is they want to know that they're running an efficient operation,
Yeah,
um, and that
exactly.
they're doing the right thing. And a lot of people lack the kind of objective way to measure that.
Yep, exactly.
Margins, the cost of goods sold, your actual margins in terms of software delivery, like those are some pretty powerful metrics. But you can't just like look at it from a distance and put together a spreadsheet and guess. Like you should actually be using actual numbers.
Yeah,
In
yep,
a software, cloud-driven organization, headcount, cloud bill, right?
yep.
Those are their two top line expenses, and they better be thinking seriously about number two for sure.
Exactly. And uh, like we've been talking with Erik about, doing some sort of like deeper integration with CloudZero and Resmo, because you have this type of like detailed information on which resources are costing which much, how much money, on CloudZero. We could like tie that data to Resmo and maybe see like over time what changed, which kind of resources deleted, like we have that kind of history. Or you can see like what are the relevant resources to that EC2 instance, like what are my VPC subnets, other resources tied to that. So really understanding the context, what's happening in your environment over time, and making a more informed decision. Even like when you save your next year's contract with AWS, how much money you are going to spend. Like if you have that kind of information, you could actually save a lot more over the long run. Am I correct?
Yeah.
I mean, just giving that kind of commitment. I've seen like a lot of companies trying to spend their AWS credits over the last last quarter. They're just buying stuff on AWS marketplace just because they want to spend their money because they already made the commitment, right?
Oh,
I
well,
mean,
that's a whole nother, yeah, that's a whole nother, ball of wax, actually. I've been seeing that too. And I
yeah.
think, you have a lot of companies right now that are either because their business is down, so their usage of cloud is down, or
Mm-hmm.
they've aggressively, embarked on some cost savings activities. But now they're looking at that EDP commit and going, wait a second, we're we messed up. We still have to spend that money. We have that commit, and so I think there's going to be a banner year actually for the AWS marketplaces or the cloud marketplaces. All the GCP, Azure, Amazon, they all have marketplaces. There's going to be a banner year for this because um, these companies have engaged. They've got these EDP commits that they're not going to make.
Yep. This year,
uh,
yeah.
so the marketplaces are going to have a fantastic time. We were talking with one customer. We saw a single transaction on their bill, $5 million. And of course, that piqued our interest. It was pretty much an anomaly, right? But what did they do?
Yeah.
They just purchased a multi-year Mongo, DB license, right?
To AWS marketplace.
And they did it all up front. And they're like, yeah, and we're like, why? And they're like, well, we're set for our commit now, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's a pretty big transaction. Like, yeah, but it made sense, right? Otherwise, they were
Yeah.
going to lose that money, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, so like I want to just dig deeper a bit on like the top challenges.
Mm.
Like we've already talked about how at different stages companies think about like what are the challenges. But overall, I mean, in terms of if we tie that to uh, capabilities, kind of visibility. I mean, what are the top challenges that people face when they try to do cloud cost management?
Yeah, well, this is going to sound strange, but nobody in this space, honestly, until CloudZero, I think, really started to focus on this problem because it seemed so obvious to me, but was doing one thing super. Nobody in the space was doing something that's super important that everybody needs to do, but nobody was doing it right, which is
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost accurate allocation and attribution of spend. It seems like an obvious thing to do, and the reason nobody was doing this right was because every single solution out there was passing the buck. They're saying, "Hey, we have this fantastic cost, optimization, cost platform, management. Everything works fantastic. as long as you do one thing. Can you guess what that one thing is? It's as long as you properly tag everything that you have, right? And it's kind of like, hey, we can do organization as long as you've already done organization, right? And they're like, yeah, but organization's my problem. Well, why is it? Well, because it's hard to properly tag stuff. It's actually, you're solving this like very nuanced problem with this hammer or sledgehammer of a thing called tags, which was born out of the infrastructure era and doesn't really connect to what you're trying to do, which is map your business. And
Mhm.
so people were using functionality, but they weren't fully allocating all of their spend. They weren't seeing things down to the right business units or the right teams or the right things. And this lack of clarity meant that the number one tool in this space is actually not any of these platforms that have been built out there, but Microsoft Excel, right? Because what people would do is go, all right, well, I got about 60% of my spend map, but it's all kind of still wrong. Click the export button, open it up in Excel. Now I'm going to run a bunch of calculations to try to massage the data until it sort of feels right, and then we're going to use that. Well, guess what? None of this is going to work for engineers. None of this is
Yep.
going to work for the people spending the money. None of it is going to be accurate for having a conversation across your whole business. And so right out of the gate, we saw this as like this like fundamental thing that we have to get right. So we thought about it from a data engineering perspective. It's a big data problem at the end of the day. And then we also thought about it from the fact that we have every one of our customers has a unique type of business, but we have to make this repeatable and something that we can build a platform around. So we developed a language called cost formation that allows people to define exactly how all these rules work. And tags is just one input to that. It's actually not even a requirement to make it right because we can pull in all this other data. We could even talk, Serhat, about maybe building an integration, pulling in data from Resbo, right, to help people organize all that information.
Mhm.
And this gave us this kind of superpower to go in and very accurately, for the first time ever, have this consistent picture of what people are spending their money on, what that an engineer could look at, that a FinOps person could look at, that a product person, an executive, a CFO, your board, right? Everybody from board member down to the most junior engineer has like now a clean, consistent picture, and you're not living in Excel.
Yep.
So, that set the stage for all of these other things that we could do, and people are still struggling with that because they've kind of passed the buck to the cloud provider.
Yep.
And so we've been building on top of that great things like anomaly detection and budgets and all these other kind of fundamental capabilities, and we've got some other really cool stuff planned around the corner. But it starts with like this real amazing clarity into what you're spending. You bring in what I talked about earlier, telemetry. Now you can break apart stuff by all this other information: cost per query, cost per customer, cost per transaction, whatever it is. Right? We call this unit economics, and it's changing how people manage everything. It's exciting to me for sure.
Yep.
But anyways, I may have gotten lost in my answer to your question there
No,
because I
no,
get
that was good actually. I mean, that brought up some other questions. Uh, so one question is like we are looking at, let's say, AWS. That's your major cloud provider, but
sure.
you may have some other tools actually that are costing you maybe as much like a monitoring tool. So they
Oh
are,
yeah,
you're
it's
right,
part of your
or
cogs. Yeah, absolutely.
exactly, or your Kubernetes cluster somehow, or you have multi-cloud. Like, what do you think about like overall getting visibility?
Mhm.
Is that like, I mean, you have Snowflake, I mean, you have Kubernetes.
Yeah.
It's really becomes, I think, a bigger challenge to just tie those, different types of data together and getting a. I mean, it's really, I mean, you just, it's very easy to just blame an EC2 than just knowing your actual cost. So,
Right. No, you have to pull it all together. CloudZero, where we use a lot of different cloud providers in the delivery of our service, and it's not just cloud providers, cloud service providers, or I think the world is thankfully moving on from being hyper obsessed with this term multi-cloud and instead moving to more of a multi-service reality. And what I mean by multi-service is I don't I no longer worry about like the myth of lock-in and trying to have these like fungible, like, ephemeral workloads that I can move from one cloud provider to another, because honestly, those are super expensive, super crazy architectures to build. You have to build to the lowest common denominator anyways. And we could talk an hour about that. So I'm gonna set that topic aside.
Yeah.
But to one where people go, well, hey, what's the best service for the job, right? I have a monitoring tool that I use. Maybe I use Datadog. I have a data warehouse or database platform that I use, Snowflake, right? I use AWS for maybe the majority, as my anchor, in the cloud. But I also use some stuff over in GCP, and it's just like open source. I'm composing my application of all the kind of best of breed things that allowed me to iterate faster and bring value to the market faster. Right?
Yep.
I didn't do these decisions because of perceived threats of lock-in, but I did it because I wanted better time to market and better efficiency. Now, you don't really measure or know if you've got those things if you aren't combining all that into one common representation of what you're spending your money on.
Yep.
So that's where CloudZero, we built out last year. We launched something called AnyCost, which lets even our customers build adapters to bring data into our platform. And we're actually partnering up with the FinOps Foundation on a future project that they're working on, actually to evolve that standard even more. And we're going to be investing a lot of time and energy in there, because the value that we bring to the market isn't that we can connect to all these different cloud providers. It's what we do with the data. So we just want to make that as easy as possible for that data to flow. So yeah, we support Databricks and all the
Yeah.
information. New Relic, these are things that people operationally use to run their systems, and they should be looking at all of this in one common expression of their spend, and allocating that, of course, to the teams and the business units and the people who are responsible for it.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, so just as the last question, so I usually ask this question. So, what is that? One key piece of advice, for companies that are struggling with cloud cost optimization?
Yeah, I would say, the key piece of advice is you need to involve the people who are building the solutions. I'll, at the risk of maybe adding, just kind of going a little bit deep on this for a second. I think it was in January of 2002. Bill Gates wrote this memo about the Trustworthy Compute Initiative. Allow me to go back here a little bit. And this was about security, right? And what was interesting is, at that time, there's an existential threat happening in Microsoft. They were unable to, they were getting hacked left, right, and center. Their customers were getting hacked left, right, and center. It was an existential threat to the business. Bill Gates wrote this memo and essentially set the stage and said, we're going to stop, as a software organization, we're going to stop building new features, and we are going to focus on security, because we're going to go out of business. Customers are losing their trust and faith in us if we don't solve this problem. And that was this kind of Pearl Harbor moment for the security industry. And it was a realization that all of the efforts in the security space had failed leading up to that. And the reason was because the software engineers had not been involved in solving the problem. Now, today, when you think about a modern software development lifecycle, security is part of that process, right? Developers are on the hook to deliver great stuff. So where are we today, right? We're in the exact same place, right? Right now, we are building towards this Pearl Harbor moment. It's coming any day now. In fact, the economy may be causing it to happen right now, which is that it's not that our customers are going to lose faith in us, it's that our businesses will go out of business because we have been trying to solve the cost problem with finance. We've been trying to solve the cost problem outside of the people who build these solutions. And that is the existential threat to our business. And we have to wake up and realize that it is only going to be solved by the people who are making those buying decisions. So when I work with a new prospect, I'm talking to a new prospect, new customer, right? There's all kinds of ways we can deliver immediate value, but the ultimate solution here is to change to set your company on a path to changing that culture, providing them visibility and at all levels of the organization and what they're spending their money on. And it fundamentally changes things for the better. And I've seen it over and over and over again. We have thousands of people, developers, logging into our platform.
Yep.
In the past, when I've looked at solutions like this, they had one or two DevOps people logging into the platform, and they were trying to disseminate this information to the rest of the organization, and they weren't seeing a lot of success, right? I know that we've taken a different approach in that we're seeing a completely different kind of level of success because developers themselves are logging into our platform. They're getting feedback on what they're doing right and what wrong. So, some people tell me they're not ready for that. So the piece of advice, long answer to a short question, Serhat. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. I
Stuff.
mean, we have some time.
Yeah, is hey, get your engineers into the loop, right?
Yep.
Just like Bill Gates told the world in 2002, get your engineers into the loop. I don't want to be like Ballmer and jump around on the stage, yelling developers, developers, developers. But it is developers, developers, developers. Like that's the center of this whole thing. The future has always been there. So,
Yep.
so that's a lot. A lot of things. Of course, there's other things that we have to do. We have to keep a lot of people happy. The FinOps people, the finance people, the business. This is fundamental to those things. But if you don't, if you show up at the restaurant and you give, everybody the menu without prices, they're going to order the most expensive thing every time, right? And that's the result you're going to get. You're going to get a very expensive bill at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
there's a lot to be said about how all this kind of feeds together. But
yep. And just overall, I mean, as a general look at this kind of stuff is same with DevOps. Just it's important to actually give visibility to people who are actually responsible or working on these type of stuff. Either it's security, like if someone is using a weak password, like if only the security people are just seeing it and trying to fix it, if the actual person like who needs to be more careful about this stuff aren't getting any alerts on this, you're not going to be able to scale. I mean, you're not going to be able to solve the problem's root cause.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's just same for security, same for FinOps, same for DevOps. That's really the bottom of it. I mean, that's a really good point. And the Microsoft, I love the Microsoft, reference and all that.
Yeah, it's the same thing. We're in the same spot, and it's the difference is, that companies, Microsoft is going to go out of business because their customers are losing faith in them. If companies don't get this right today with cloud spend, they're going to do one of two things. They may decide that cloud was a mistake. There is this growing conversation about repatriating assets out of the cloud and going back to the data center. Some companies already started to go down that path. And honestly, I think they're making a huge mistake because they're giving up agility and they're giving up, kind of the future in terms of innovation, all because they haven't figured out how to build properly, right? You design like it's 1999, and you're gonna have a bad day. It's gonna be super expensive, right?
Yep, exactly. Erik, so
you have to think differently about it. So, anyways.
Yeah. I mean, so this was my last question, but really, I mean, this was on purpose because I want to just show folks, a few, screenshots or a short, very very short demo on both CloudZero and Resmo. So let's start with what you have. Like, can you show what actually like CloudZero looks like? Maybe some screenshots, whatever works for you.
Yeah, I would love to show a quick example actually.
Yeah, that would be great because it's really, I mean, just hearing stuff is something, but actually seeing it, that makes it very easy to understand.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, and I'm not going to show any slides. We're all about engineering profit here, but it is about getting engineers to think about this differently. So I'm going to jump to a super techie example really quickly just to be in line with what we're talking about here. What we're looking at here is this is where I would have been pulled to by CloudZero's anomaly detection, for example, right? An alert would have gone out down to the feature level, down to the specific team that's responsible for that feature, because we saw obviously something going on here that didn't look quite right. And there's a lot of visibility at the business level to get down to this level. But what I want anybody looking at this to realize is we've intentionally zeroed in on the scene of the crime here for something that could be very expensive. And we're augmenting this view with additional data. It's not just cost data. I actually have a GitHub check-in that we tracked that is, that we can see is like correlated with the first kind of spike in spend here. Then I have an anomaly that's occurring. And this is something all of our customers have to learn, that the anomalies that we're going to identify, we want to tell people about it when it's like $70, right? Even if they're spending, we had one customer spending millions of dollars and we sent them an anomaly is like $250, and like their first reaction was, do we care about this? And we're like, yeah, because look, did you look at the full alert? It's projected to be $250,000 if you don't do anything about it. But because we're catching it early, you're going to save a ton of money. And then this is what we want to see, is that there's a GitHub check-in afterwards that tells us that, hey, somebody fixed this, right? So this example is super powerful for a lot of reasons. One, I've got low-level detail here. Two, I've got actually information, context that helps me understand what's going on. There was a GitHub check-in, there was an anomaly, there was another GitHub check-in. So if I'm maybe the manager, I'm looking at this going, okay, somebody fixed it. The cost went back to where it belongs right here. And I'm super happy about that, right? And if I'm in the process of triaging this, I can go and click on these details and I can actually get into like the lower level details. I can see what things are connected to. We could even like maybe pump in some data from Resbo here to get even a better picture of like all the resources that are going on here. If there's any recent changes associated with this, it's all kind of connecting the dots, so that if I'm trying to triage this problem, and we've had customers where they get an alert, and again, like if they don't take action quickly, they could be looking at tens of thousands of dollars. So we've got all that organization I was talking about earlier, everything that this is built on top of, which allows us to do real ML and anomaly detection of things, get that alert directly to the team that's responsible for that, and then get them in a place where they can quickly fix it. I love this example for like so many different reasons. One, from its simplicity, but also just the fact that it's just super clean. And we hear from engineers like this is what kind of drives change in their environment. And I can, of course, like zoom out of this and take a more business-centric look, right? Here I'm looking at it in my demo environment here on a business dimension, from my company. And as I drill down into that, I'm looking at, the products that I deliver, and then like, let me look at those products, and then I can start to look at it from like a services perspective, what's consumed that. And that organization is entirely driven by what we call dimensions, which, is that language I talked about, cost formation. So the customer can build that organization even if they don't have their tags perfectly or not. So there's a lot of things that CloudZero does well, but this is just one, kind of use case that's really specific to the engineers. So yeah, thanks for letting me share that with everyone. I appreciate it.
Of course, I especially love the attribution part to connecting that GitHub issue, GitHub pull request to the actual cost. Like it's really important to tie those type of connections together to be able to actually detect what kind of change caused that spike or reducing cost.
Yeah. Now you guys have been up to something. I got like I've been playing with your product for a little bit for a while. It's pretty cool. I'd like to see what's new actually.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just show a few pages. So what we are doing is so you have all those SaaS tools in your stack or cloud providers. So we do connect to 70 plus integrations to basically collect which kind of assets you have in those environments. So we can first create your asset inventory. Basically what you have, like in AWS, Azure, Cloudflare, Datadog, whatever you have, or custom data even. So you have a complete inventory, and if you want to drill down, like maybe you just want to see what are your EC2 instances like across 100 different set of accounts, either through organizations or just connect individually with just one click, really. And you can see like these are my EC2 instances, and these are high risk EC2 instances. Why is that?
Yeah, what does that mean, high risk? What are you guys finding there?
That means we are doing some security checks for especially cloud. We do have a lot of security checks built into product. Like you connect your AWS, within only a couple of minutes, you can see this. By the way, it's really start a free trial, and there is a free plan. You can actually try it now. And what these security rules, they come from first like best practices or benchmarks, official benchmarks like CIS benchmarks. So we became an official partner. So we do automate CIS benchmarks. So you can see this rule actually is failing. Like AWS instances should use IMDS version 2. That's why this, or there are like other rules actually failing. Like AWS instances should be managed by AWS Systems Manager. Some of them are, yeah.
I have a near and dear to my heart, like, yeah, a lot of people see IMDS and they go, "What is that?" I'm like, I might be the only person on the planet, well, besides you probably, Sarah, that the instance metadata service version 2, it's like that is a that is actually like an important thing. That's how Capital One got when they announced their breach, where there was a problem with the instance metadata version 1. It was only version 1 at the time on AWS, and it's like little details like this that are like crazy cool. I'm excited to see that, right? Like if you don't have the HTTP token, I actually gave a Black Hat talk on this years ago. So, man, you could have. I didn't know that you were going to show that. It's totally random.
That's
It's
amazing.
fantastic.
I mean, that's exactly why these things matter. I mean, and you can go and see like what this actually means. And
Yeah.
you can see, we have this compliance section where we automate CIS benchmark and, some other cool stuff. Like, for example, this ties to AWS's official, like, foundational security best practices pack. And we do automate those as well, like AWS CIS benchmark, startup security baseline, which really gives you a foundational, like, security posture, kind of view management. So it's really simple. I mean, you can start with this type of stuff, like enforcing a password policy, requiring multi-factor authentication. This sounds, really easy, or, this should come by default, but really, most startups, fail to do these simple stuff wrong, and they have no idea. So just getting this kind of visibility is really valuable. Just to give you, example on, like how we can maybe tie CloudZero data to Resmo. So let's go to this asset. We do also have relations like, so it's like, for example, this EC2 instance is tied to this VPC subnet, or this VPC, or this VPC network interface, EC2 volume, and you can drill down, show the other relations.
Oh, that's really
like
cool. Yeah.
show the details of the other asset, and go see the details. So that's really one thing. The other thing I want to show you guys is the changes piece. So for every asset, so this was an internal change. So let me go to, for example, let's say, I'm not sure if, let's say S3 buckets. So just, go to one of the S3 buckets, go to changes. So what we do is, we do try to, detect any change really in any bucket. So this is a demo environment, so that's why we are seeing a few other things. But let's say there was a change, and you can see the encryption is enabled at that point in time, and you can query this type of stuff. And even like in the changes view, for example, you want to see what kind of resources I deleted, like on my AWS environment. Let's say change types, maybe removed resources, you want to see them. So let me just make it bigger. And you can see, like, think of it like EC2, AWS CloudTrail, but really for every SaaS or every tool you integrate with.
A lot of this stuff is all about usability. And, I've talked to people who go, "Oh, yeah, well, I can enable AWS config and I can go do this thing in Amazon already and blah, 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 blah." But nobody who is using those native tools, I think, gets it right. Like that this
Exactly.
is a usability problem, that you're going to miss things. Things are going to fall through the cracks. I think you've built a really, honestly,
Yep.
Sarah, yeah, I think you and the team have built a really, gorgeous product around this information. And that's
Thank you.
sometimes that's, some of the most important things you can do, honestly,
Yep.
to solve this problem. So yeah, that's fantastic. I love it.
Thank you. I feel the same way for CloudZero. Like,
We're gonna spend some time working to get cost in there, for sure.
exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly. That would be nice. I feel the same way. AWS has, config, security hub, or other security tools, which are great for, like, SREs that really loves to, go deep into stuff. But, the usual, engineer, or, people actually using those products, they won't have time to figure out those tools. I mean, you use them the right way.
No, or even if they do know how to figure out those tools, they got better things to do with their time.
Exactly.
Right?
That's the point. Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
For people who know me, I'm a huge serverless fan, and one of the reasons is because I also get to spend my time on things that I can let Amazon worry about. I don't have to worry about. So
Exactly.
it's always great when you can pay somebody else to worry about things for you. So, well, hey, Sarah, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. This is awesome stuff.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Eric. I mean, it's my it's a pleasure to have you with me today. Learned a lot as always, and we will put this on YouTube. So if you guys want to see a section or share it on social media, feel free to do it. And if you want to get a demo from Eric, we can just go to cloudzero.com.
Yeah, CloudZero.com, easy to get there. You can find me on Twitter somewhere, but it's CloudZero.com is a piece of cake, right? And same thing. I'm gonna go get my go spend some time on Resbo. Fantastic.
Thanks, Eric. Great to chat with you today.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.